One.
Hi, Seth.
Hey, Brandon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Man,
So we
I
haven't
gotta
talked
say,
before this.
what's that?
He said we haven't talked before this.
No, we haven't. We just got on just now. We didn't plan that, started the record at all. Um, Man, every time I smile, I gotta say, I get self-conscious on Zoom because it looks like I have a black decaying tooth. Like, watch this. And I go,
You're a pirate. Oh, yeah,
yeah,
it's your mustache. Yeah.
it's my mustache. But I'm so like, I'm always like, trying to like get it to move up because I'm like doing these Bible studies, and
Yeah.
these, I'll laugh at some joke and then I'm like, oh, these old women think I like had terrible dental hygiene, So I just want you to know that, like, so you know that, and any viewers know that I don't have bad rotting teeth when I,
Okay.
smile.
I got something for you.
Oh yeah?
Yes. I think I have a little song, a little theme song for our
Oh, really?
But
Let's
here's
hear
the
it.
gauntlet is that each time we talk, you've got to come up with a theme song the next time.
Okay.
That's the gauntlet. There's my
Hey,
father-in-law.
Seth. All right. Hey.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah. That
Okay.
that sounds good.
We're about to have loads of fun. Intentionally, Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson. There you go.
That really is a jingle. That was like 9 seconds long.
And when I say we're about to have loads of fun, that means specifically me and you and no one else.
And no one else. Yeah. There won't be many people watching, and the people who do watch will have no fun watching this. I have assured them all of that.
So next week, you've got to come up with something.
Yeah, I got to think about that. Maybe I got to use my little micro Korg synth and make a Stranger Things version of this.
Yeah. Do you not have acoustic guitar there?
I do, and a classical.
Oh, you know what? When you smile, there's something wrong with your tooth.
Okay, so bad. It's so annoying.
So this week we're talking about Isle of Dogs, which is Wes Anderson's most recent film.
Is it? No, it's not.
It came after Grand Budapest, didn't it?
Wow, is Isle of Dogs seriously his? Yeah. So, okay. Well, hold on. Before we talk about that, you're in a different place. Why don't you tell us where you're at right now?
I'm on vacation in Hilton Head, South Carolina with my in-laws.
That sounds like fun.
You're in Wisconsin. And again, that's a great distance between us.
Yeah, it is a great distance. I'm here, but the rest of my family's on vacation. They just left today. My wife is going to visit her parents, and so she took the kids, and she does this usually once a summer. She'll go visit her parents, and the kids get to hang out with their grandparents, and I get a little bit of privacy, which I almost never get, especially in COVID time. So it's actually really nice.
And so Adelaide, I think last time we recorded, Adelaide was in the background crying towards the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So there won't be, the cat might come into the background and meow, but other than that, there won't be anything.
What's interesting though is even though none of the family's there, you're still in the basement, even though you have complete privacy.
Oh, that's true. I just had all my computer set up. I guess I should take it upstairs maybe.
We'll do a tour later.
It might be better light. One guy complained when he watched this, he was like, your brother or your bro looks good in that video, but you look like you got like Vaseline rubbed all over your camera or something. So,
oh, really? I guess it's a little bit of.
I think it's just because it's an old MacBook. It's like a 12-year-old MacBook or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. So
yeah,
it's just not high res at all. So
well, if we can get sponsored by Mac, then we can maybe, get some.
Bill Gates, if you're listening to this, call Steve Jobs from Beyond the Grave. Tell him
Bill Gates
that he needs to get Mac to sponsor us. What's the new guy's name? Tim Cook?
I don't know. We're sponsored by Woodchuck Hard Cider Mimosa in this episode.
This is not shameless product placement. Those are things that we genuinely love.
We're sponsored by Angel's Envy Bourbon.
Oh, that's the one you told me about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, in this episode, we're sponsored by Botan.
How many things are you drinking right now?
Botanist gin.
Man, you're going nuts here with the alcohol. Is that what vacation's like for you?
That really is, though. It's kind of like, I try to practice moderation, but on vacation, let's just drink for every lunch and supper.
I try to practice moderation, but when you're on vacation, let's drink.
Intentionally, Wes Anderson. All right, Isle of Dogs.
Okay, so I got a funny story about Isle of Dogs.
Okay.
It's funny that you say it is the most recent of his because I didn't realize that when I watched it. And I have a distinct memory of seeing it because we used to live in Washington State, near Tacoma, which has a great theater called the Grand. And at the Grand, we saw lots of really cool movies. And I think I mentioned that in the last episode as well. The Lobster and Lady Bird and Birdman and all, Three Billboards and all kinds of stuff. Well, we saw Isle of Dogs there, but we went the day of, it was like an hour after I got my vasectomy. So I went and got the snip, and I had like frozen peas on my balls. And I'm sitting there just trying to I kind of like shuffled in, and my wife's, with me. And we just sit there and we were like the only people in the theater. So every now and then I'd shift these frozen peas around on my poor little nutsack, and
Before this episode, you asked, is it okay if we talk about personal things, meaning the vacation, where I'm out on vacation? But I didn't know that we were going to that level.
Do you want to talk about something that personal, Brandon?
Should I get a vasectomy before we watch the next? We watch French Dispatch?
Yes, and then put your frozen peas on there when you're at the theater.
Shared experience.
So Isle of Dogs, you said most recent one, so that's pretty cool. Normally we're going to go chronologically, but on just this one went way to the other end before we go back to Royal Tenenbaums because you were not going to be able to watch a Wes Anderson movie this week, but I was, and this is the only one I think that I really like that you don't like at all.
I wouldn't say at all, but I've seen it twice and I don't want to see it 3 times.
So is it your second least favorite Wes Anderson movie?
I think that's true. Yeah. Okay. Bottle Rocket would be my least, and then Isle of Dogs.
So my question is, why do you hate dogs?
I'll tell you why I don't enjoy Isle of Dogs.
Okay.
We saw it in theaters too. And I remember having just a weird feeling afterwards. I didn't have the same kind of feeling that I had walking out of Grand Budapest or walking out of Moonrise Kingdom. And I think those are the ones where I started watching it in the theater, because before that, we saw Steve Zissou in college, as we talked about before. Yeah. And then Darjeeling Limited, I didn't see in the theaters. And then Moonrise Kingdom. So I didn't have the same feeling, but when it came out to stream, I watched it again. And I think the conclusion I've come to is that for me, I can't think of one character I actually like in the whole movie. There's nothing for me, there's no character that makes me want to follow through with the story.
I could see that from a human perspective because there's no like main big character you empathize with, maybe besides the boy Atari, but the dogs, I think. You didn't like sort of empathize with any of the dogs?
Well, the main character ends up being Bryan Cranston. Mm-hmm. That dog, he kind of takes over the story. And I don't know. I'd love somebody to like dissect my the psychology behind this, but I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't get into his story. So it's kind of like almost even, does it seem like he has a hero's journey to you at all?
A hero's journey. Yeah, kind of, I guess. Yeah. It's just weird because he's not in the very beginning of the movie, and he doesn't really take a large role until like 30 or 45 minutes into the movie. And I think that's probably part of the oddity.
But I think also once he finishes the hero's journey and he gets a master, or I guess there's a kid that, adopts him, and he becomes part of that family and ends up having children of his own. It doesn't seem like he has changed much by this process.
No, he starts off being sort of, he bites, and he's aggressive, or he feels he's aggressive toward humans. And then he sort of ends up becoming a pet and realizing that's okay to, receive affection. And so he's got a little bit of transformation that happens when he eats the puppy snap, and,
That's true. So. I guess it was what is it called? What is it called when you
anthropomorphic?
Anthropomorphic idea of it that I just couldn't get into it. And then also just the story wasn't interesting to me. I do like that Wes Anderson pulled heavily from Japanese cinema to make this film. And I love that. I mean, having seen I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Akira Kurosawa. Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so. I don't know.
Okay. Having seen some of his movies, I enjoyed him pulling from that director's filmography. But and I just love the subtitle. Like when the film begins, you have those kind of very yeah. I just
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. The aesthetics of it.
Yeah, I mean that goes for the stop motion animation too, right? I
Yeah,
always respect that a lot.
yeah. It's very attention. I mean, it's very. There's a lot of attention, or what is it called? Attention to detail.
Yeah.
So there's even with the when the movie starts out and the kids are playing with the drums. I want to say drums, but that sounds like appropriation. What's the words? What's the
Some kind of
instrument they're using?
percussion. I don't
Yeah,
know.
some kind of percussion instrument. Um, and that's truly, I mean, they're doing it in time. I mean, as a drummer,
Mhm.
and you probably know as a musician yourself, like seeing it is really impressive. Because I don't know how often you watch movies where you're just like, they did.
It's so weird you mentioned that because I remembered a conversation I had with you not long ago, and I mentioned it to Chelsea when we were talking about movies that do that and how much of a like faux pas it was for Sweet and Lowdown, you know? And it's like
That's
as
the one
good
I
of
was
a
gonna bring up.
director, yeah. It's like the
Yeah,
best example because it's like Woody Allen's a great director, and like Sean Penn's a good actor, and the rest of the movie is actually pretty good. But like that is a one unforgivable thing that literally does ruin the entire movie. Like he is
yeah,
so obviously not playing guitar or anything close to what is being
yeah.
played on guitar that it's so messed up.
They'll be doing a solo and he's just kind of like he's trying to find his way. It's so weird.
It's really odd,
But
really
the
odd.
story is good. And
Yeah.
I just don't understand why so it goes to show that you and I, our focus are more oriented towards attention to detail. And some people could probably forgive that with that movie. And I don't know why Woody Allen, being he's a jazz musician playing clarinet, why he allowed that to, I
And
know he
like
makes movies quick.
and Sean Penn too, like, isn't he like sometimes known as a method actor?
I think so. I know he got really deep into the movie where he was that Tim Robbins directed, the
Yeah.
singer.
It was a Cape Fear or something like that.
No, it was the one where he was a convicted felon and
Yeah.
he was going through the death sentence, but Christian, I think nun or something like Susan Sarandon was trying to show grace to him during this time.
Oh, okay. It just is a weird. Anyway, I don't want to divert onto that too much, but I mean, I think you're right. We notice those things and seeing those kids having that time up and knowing how hard that is to get that to look right
Yeah.
that's a lot of work. So it's
And
impressive.
I will say I love that about this movie. That's something that really pulls you into it too. It makes it feel real when you feel like, even though it's stop motion animation, you feel pulled into it and it feels so realistic because of his attention to detail. But again, at the end of the movie, there just wasn't a character that I enjoyed, and I didn't enjoy the overall arc of the story.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
for me, and I saw it in theaters and I saw it once it came out, and both times was just felt a certain level of disappointment.
Hmm. I mean, even from just a visual standpoint, I think it's almost worthwhile because I'm just a big fan of stop motion, like the Tim Burton stuff, and
Yeah.
I liked Fantastic Mr. Fox. I don't know that anyone would make like my top 20 films or anything like that, but I really do like that stuff. And when it's done well, that already puts it like on a level of like good for me. But I do think the story was pretty solid. Like it's a neat little it's I was noticing, I don't know why I'd never noticed before, but Wes Anderson doesn't really get into politics very much at all. But that movie has a lot of politics. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty thinly veiled as far as this sort of like authoritarian kind of fascist, government that pulls all these strings and does all this stuff to demonize or villainize one subset of the population, in this case the animal population, to favor another one, and abandons them. And it's just it was really kind of fascinating to me with all the resistance stuff and the sabotage and the poisoning. Oh, great story about this one. I was watching it, by the way. So I like to lie down when I watch movies, so I usually watch in the bed, watching the TV at the foot of the bed. And my 6-year-old Adley was watching it with me, and when the guy gets poisoned, he didn't realize what had happened. So he goes, "Oh, why is that guy dead?" And I said, "Oh, there was poison in his food. The government poisoned him and killed him." And Adley put his face right in my face, like this far from my face, like, is poison in real life? I was like,
Yeah.
yes, it's in real life. I don't know why your nose has to almost touch my nose to ask me that question, but yes, poison is in real life.
Yeah.
He was really wild-eyed about the idea that you could eat something that would kill you. So,
Has he
oh,
expressed that again in his eating? Has he asked the
no,
question again? Okay.
no. He asked for a really weird dinner last night, which we finally got him to eat, but tortellini, chili beans, and some other weird, like, odd combination of something. And I was just like, okay. So he ate just regular chili beans and just tortellini with nothing on it and whatever that other thing was. So no.
So what do you think Wes Anderson is trying to say something in this movie with some of the political things you noticed, or do you have an opinion on that?
I don't know. I mean, I just, it may be because when I saw it, so that was 2018 when it came out. So it's 3 years. Actually, it's more than 3 years since that came out. And I just picked up on more of that, as you know, it shouldn't be surprising for most of us that the last 5 or 6 years have really brought an incredibly heightened awareness of, you know, history and governments and what these terms mean and what they look like, you know, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I feel like I should have noticed that in 2018, but I guess not. You know, although now that I'm saying the thing about Wes Anderson and politics, I'm remembering that Grand Budapest had some pretty serious political
There was
terms.
fascism. Yeah. And
Yeah,
based on, did you ever read Stefan Zweig, any of his work?
I don't think so.
It's supposed to be based on the world of yesterday, I think is what it is, where there was all this progress in Vienna, and everyone thought that, you know, nothing could destroy the human spirit. And then all of a sudden you have fascism and Nazism and all these other, I mean, the 20th century is just, there's several different examples of that.
Yeah,
But apparently he drew from that as inspiration for Grand Budapest. So there is some politics in that. And I just wonder if as he gets older, politics, so it comes more into the story.
it could.
Um,
Yeah, that might be. I mean, do you sense that about French Dispatch? There probably will be something in there that's like connected to politics, won't there?
I don't notice anything yet. I was trying to think. There are the three stories. So there's the one where they're interviewing the police chef, one where they're interviewing the artist, and the other story is actually, there are politics in it, where the younger kids, Timothy Chalamet, I think is how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name.
I don't either.
Okay. Well, he is part of a rebellion, right? Him and Francis McDormand, who are in the same story.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
So probably specific to that story are some political undertones.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. So maybe there's just it is interesting that he's careful to, and it's probably smart. Be careful not to connect it too strongly to current situations, you know, so that
Yeah.
you can still sort of interact with and explore what these things look like and how they impact and give and take with the real world, how they did in the past and how they might in sort of this theoretical present. But he doesn't ever seem to really connect those things with modern America in any way. So
You don't want to isolate your audience, basically.
yeah, and I mean it's probably, you know, in some ways it's more effective that way because you want people to notice these things on their own and then identify them on their own, and it doesn't work when it's too on the nose and you say this is that, and you know, it just it takes
In any kind of art, that doesn't work.
Yeah,
as well.
It's weird though, because I was thinking about that with political bands. You know, I really love Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down, and even like old folk guys like Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan masked it a little more. And I guess you could say the music style by Rage and System of a Down, you know, masked it a little bit. I don't know if you've seen these, like you'll see like Reddit posts and stuff or tweets of like people saying, you know, Zach De La Rocha or Serge Tankian were literally screaming these lyrics at us, and none of us knew what they were talking about. And like Prison System song, it's all about like they're building a prison system, and this is like 20 years old, and the chorus is like the exact same thing over and over. And like I think we're all just like, yeah, man, rock and roll, and we're like, you know, headbanging. And it's all he did was repeat the same line like 40 times and none of us got the message. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think I was also, I want to say this really quick before we digress too far, but I did think about this with Captain Planet, that as I was a kid, there was a cartoon about pollution on, and I didn't think about the serious ramifications of environmentalism, but there was a cartoon show that was geared towards looking at that issue.
Yeah.
And did anything get solved? I mean, through Captain Planet, maybe in the episodes, but people still don't recycle that much. People still, throw everything away. Everything's being made to throw away. So it is interesting thinking that these stories have been around for a long time. And how much, I mean, even with Bob Dylan, going back to him, he said at some point in his career, he said, you can't change the world with a song.
Yeah. I guess it depends. I think we talked about this before. It depends on what you mean by change the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. Okay. Let's get off the politics thing before we go too far down that rabbit hole.
What do you think this movie is about?
Isle of Dogs. I think probably at base, my guess is that Wes Anderson must have some affinity for dogs himself. I remember Sean Hughes, one of our mutual friends, called me afterward and talked about, because he's a huge dog person, like probably was closer to his dog growing up than almost anybody I knew that had a pet dog. And that meant a lot to him. So I would imagine like there's obviously the whole thing rests on like Atari and his love for his dog and his dog's love for him. Yeah. So I think that's probably got to be a lot of it. It's interesting he doesn't villainize cats. In fact, cats never really come into it, even though that's what Kobayashi, the mayor, sort of favorites as they're expelling the dogs. He's even got the cat tattoo on his back, but like he did a good job of not making cats out to be the bad guy. They're just there and they're, I guess they're just living their life and suddenly they have no dogs to worry about. I don't know.
And this may sound like a pun, but there's a hint of underdog, the kind of underdog story that does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so. So like the main character, I want to say his name is Chief. Is it Chief that Bryan Cranston's dog is?
I think there is a dog named Chief.
Yeah. He meets his brother. He finds out that Atari's dog was his brother and they're from the same litter. And Chief asks him, was I the runt? And the other dog says, not anymore. So definitely there's an underdog story there to like, he was the runt and it always probably played on his psychology. And then he did this thing where he snapped at the kid and doesn't understand why. And now he's fending for himself and he's a loner and he's got a couple other dogs in his pack, but he totally has this transformation, even visualized through the getting clean. So he's not a black dog, he's a white dog. And you realize, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So
this movie has so Moonrise Kingdom was a big success, and we'll talk about this later as we reach these movies. But Life is this Steve Zissou, or Life Aquatic, and Darjeeling Limited both had really bad reviews, and then Moonrise Kingdom came out and it got 90. So I'm just thinking about Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Moonrise Kingdom came out and I think that was about 80 to 90%. Grand Budapest had the highest, I think. And then this one comes out and it received critical acclaim as well.
Okay.
So with that comes a little more people paying attention to what he's saying as his movies are becoming more popular. And there's a lot of people who said, or some critics were talking about racial stereotyping and cultural appropriation. Did you feel that at all as you were watching the movie?
For Isle of Dogs?
Yeah.
No, but I never have a good ear for that stuff, to be honest. So
it's hard.
I don't know. I will say this. I did notice that every single character in the movie pronounces the city's name Nagasaki. And I went and looked it up because I used that in a sermon because it was the 76th anniversary of us dropping the nuke and I pronounced it Nagasaki. Yeah. So I went and looked, I was like, was I wrong to pronounce it Nagasaki? But no, I was right. For whatever reason, I have no idea why every character, both Japanese and American, English speaking, in the film pronounces it Nagasaki. That was really weird. So I don't know what's going on there, but
I don't either. Let's bring Wes Anderson in to the video chat and ask him.
Okay, so I have this book, Accidentally Wes Anderson, which is a really popular Instagram account where people
and Reddit.
And read it? Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks, when people see things on their journeys that look like something out of a Wes Anderson film, some of which are apparently, they would take pictures and upload them there, and this guy would curate them. So it's pretty awesome. And that's kind of where we got the name of this series from, is instead of accidentally Wes Anderson, we are intentionally Wes Anderson. But there's some really great sort of pictures in here. And I think, but we watched Isle of Dogs. We're talking about Isle of Dogs, which isn't it's stop motion claymation, and there's nothing like that in here. But there are, speaking of dogs, here's a dog. Doesn't that look like straight out of a Wes Anderson film?
Yeah, it does.
So
it's great.
This is really great. My wife got me for this for Christmas. It's curated by a guy named Wally Koval, but and then Wes Anderson wrote the foreword for it. So
did he really? Wow. Yeah. So actually, he's aware of this thing.
Yeah, there's a line here that's really great too that actually I want to read you, because I've thought about it and I thought about it a lot and quoted it to Chelsea at times. But he says I now, at the end of it, I now understand what it means to be accidentally myself. Thank you. I'm still confused what it means to be deliberately me, if that is even what I am.
That's so good. Oh man. So I wonder, when you have somebody's name as part of something, do they get any kind of royalties or money? Like, his name has become part of this thing that this dude's making money off of.
Maybe. I'd actually doubt this dude's making very much money. I doubt this book was really expensive to make. It's big and it's heavy and it's got really high color, high resolution images in it. And it didn't cost that much, and they probably didn't sell that many. So I kind of doubt he's actually making any significant money from this.
So what if I wrote some songs and labeled it Accidentally Becoming the Archetype?
You might make about 1% of what we made, which is $1 or so.
Do I have to pay you though?
No, you won't have to pay me.
Then I'm on it.
You have to pay Clifton Beardskull, our mascot.
Yeah. Is this essential, Wes Anderson?
Oh man, I kind of would say Isle of Dogs is essential. Okay, one of his stop motion has to be in there, but there's also Fantastic Mr. Fox, which we'll get to later in this series. And I guess there seem to be more. Well, I posted on Facebook that I was gonna have a video for this, and some guy commented that he said Fantastic Mr. Fox is the best Wes Anderson, which I've never heard anyone say before. So
best
I don't
movie overall or best stop animation?
Best overall.
Oh, okay.
So
it's good.
If people like that more, I guess I could see that. I don't know, but one of them ought to be. I mean, one of them's got to be essential, like in the canon or whatever.
To kind of give a good idea of what he's shooting for. I think you have to include his love of stop animation or stop motion animation. And I think Fantastic Fox would beat out this one. Fantastic Mr. Fox would beat out, in my opinion, Isle of Dogs.
Yeah, that one does have some good stuff. I mean, man, part of the great thing about both of them is the dialogue. I just they would be like, so in Isle of Dogs, there's this scene where like the two packs are about to fight over this bag of food, of garbage that's dropped there. And the one says, well, first, should we check and see if it's even worth it? Like what's in the bag? So they rip it open, and they're like in the middle of reading, like 3 broken eggs, rotting piece of meat with maggots growing on it. And like in the middle of a word, it's like, yeah, so it's worth it. And they just immediately like, it's so good.
I will say, I was thinking about like what draws me in. And there's some, if you think about this, were Royal Tenenbaums, Darjeeling Limited, there's some kind of quality of, and even Life Aquatic, of charismatic ignorance. So think about Royal and Royal Tenenbaums, Steve Zissou and Life Aquatic. What's Fantastic Mr. Fox? What's his actual name? Just Mr. Fox, or?
Yeah, I don't remember.
But there's some kind of quality of like arrogant ignorance. And I think that really pulls me in because you kind of, you're, and even Rushmore too. Rushmore has this too, where you're pulled in, even though that you're kind of like, these guys are jerks, but there's something
kind of clueless, like you said, they're ignorant. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there's some kind of redeeming quality to them that makes you want to watch. And maybe that didn't exist for me for Isle of Dogs.
Well, they're
Um,
really, yeah, I mean, you're right. There's really no one in that film that's like that.
and it's all, I mean, it's also true. I think he handled this well in Grand Budapest, even though there were several different players, key players in the movie. And this one, it almost gets lost. There's so many people that it kind of gets lost about who the main character is. Who am I supposed to be following? Eventually, as you said, in the end, Chief becomes the main person.
Yeah.
But when you're originally watching, you're thinking, okay, I'm paying attention to the boy. Oh no, no, no! Now I'm paying attention to the, these group of dogs that are looking for the other dog. Or
Yeah.
so I can't really nail down why I didn't enjoy it both times, but I just know that's my feeling.
Okay.
Um,
And that's legit. Even if it's wrong, that's legitimate. Um,
well, so why not? How would you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm being.
well, I was gonna say, you asked is it essential Wes Anderson. I would like to touch on, you mentioned the Rotten Tomatoes thing earlier. And so, we talk about rankings and ratings. I'd rank it around the middle, I think, of the Wes Anderson filmography. For me, I'd probably,
Okay.
on a scale of 1 to 10, probably get about an 8 out of 10. Um,
Wow.
but I'm curious, when we talk about like Rotten Tomatoes, I think you were talking about the critics score, because there's two scores around. There's the audience, there's the critics, and I'm a little surprised, but maybe not too much, that Life Aquatic and Darjeeling Limited weren't highly critical reviewed. I mean, it's odd timeline wise, because I remember when Royal Tenenbaums came out, it was huge. In fact, it was the first Wes Anderson I ever heard about. I was still in high school, and it was like ads on TV all the time, and they'd just be like on 100 top 10 list for the year,
Wow.
whatever. And people were nuts. And I remember watching it. I mean, we can talk about this more when we actually do that movie, but I didn't understand it at all. Like, I
Yeah.
was probably only like 16 or 17, and it made no sense to me.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember how like amazing the critical reviews were. And so it's weird that it was on all the he and his stuff were on all the critics like radar, but then he went through this lapse, I guess, of a couple of movies where they just didn't really care or like it,
Yeah.
and then he sort of come back. Whereas I wonder where the audience score is for all those movies, because my sense is that they're probably fairly stable. They're probably all in the like pretty well liked category.
That's something I want to explore when we get to those movies that were kind of the critics trashed. We can look at that. But I wonder, do you have to? So you're talking about this, and I'm thinking about your first experience with Royal Tenenbaums, my first experience with Life Aquatic. Do you have to be older, or do you have to be? Do you have you? Would you have had to watch Wes Anderson films to kind of get familiar with the thing? So you said you didn't understand that. Life Aquatic, I was thinking, I don't get this.
Yeah.
But it almost is like a fine wine in that it gets better with age. I mean, Royal Tenenbaums, I think I watch once a year.
Really? Wow.
I've seen it a lot. I don't know if it's that. I just know that if I'm down, I'll put in a Wes Anderson movie. And the
Wow.
first one I typically grab is Royal Tenenbaums or Grand Budapest.
Okay. Now that's coming up next week. We'll talk about that more next week, but that's kind of neat to know. I think it's just, to be honest, I think it's just that we talked last week about, he creates his own world in his movies. And I think it just takes some acclimation. It's like the Christopher Guest mockumentaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw, I think it was A Mighty Wind was the first one I saw. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, like, the person I was watching was laughing the whole time. And I'm like, okay, that's like kind of funny, I think,
Yeah.
but like, obviously now I think it's an incredible comedy. It's
Yeah.
one of my favorite, but um, when you haven't seen anything like it before, it's far enough out of the mainstream. This was what I was talking on a chat thing on Discord to some friends about what kind of movies I like. And so people were talking about, Marvel Universe movies and horror movies and comedies and that kind of stuff. And I was trying to say, like, I'm trying to think of how to explain this concisely. Like, I don't like the generic mainstream movies, but I don't like anything too crazy. Like if you're talking about David Lynch or something, like that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little bit too much for me. I can barely get into some of his more accessible stuff. I'm in that, like, it needs to be a little quirky, but not too crazy. And I think, Christopher Guest movies and Wes Anderson movies and, lots of directors, Christopher Nolan was like this for a while, where they're just enough removed that they're not just brain dead, eat popcorn and be
Formulaic.
yeah, right. So yeah, I think anything like that probably just takes people, a little while to sort of understand and go, oh, okay, I kind of I can appreciate this now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the same was true
I
for
do
you.
think it, like with the Mighty, I remember watching clips from Spinal Tap and just thinking these guys are jerks. I didn't get that it was funny. It was supposed to be funny. And so you do kind of have to pull yourself. It's kind of like when you get to know somebody, if they have a dry sense of humor, you're just thinking they're a jerk. But once you get to be around them more, it kind of, you acclimate to it. So there's almost that level of acclimating to Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And, probably that might have played into the critics thing as well. I was thinking about how, like, there are certain things, especially in Life Aquatic, that are just a little too quirky, probably for, like, like when he's standing, he flicks the gecko off of his, he got the lizard or gecko, he flicks it off him, like, or like the crayon fish, horsefish or whatever,
Yeah.
that's like, I mean, I think those are things that they were probably like, this is stupid,
Could be.
whereas if you're really into Wes Anderson, you're like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that you don't have stuff that's quite that silly in, Royal Tenenbaums, or especially in Grand Budapest. So
I do think Isle of Dogs is the when you're talking about silly, I do think Isle of Dogs is a good example of a mature filmmaker, someone who shows a lot of confidence in his vision. I don't know if maybe he liked that. He may have had confidence all along. I don't know. But I assume with most artists, you like that in the beginning, and then you start to really find yourself.
Yeah.
And Isle of Dogs is truly confident in its vision, and its overall story. But I wouldn't say it's essential. And I would probably, you said you gave it an 8, which I think you voted higher than Rushmore. What was your?
Oh yeah, I like it more than Rushmore. Rushmore was, I think, about probably a 7.5 for me.
Okay, so I would do the opposite. I would say Isle of Dogs is probably 7, 6.5 to 7, and Rushmore would be closer to 8.
Okay. Yeah, just a reminder on that whole scale, like, I almost never have a rating of like 1 to 5 or even to 6, because if it's that bad, I'm just not watching it in the first place, or I'm stopping it. So, if I'm watching a whole movie, and especially if I'm watching it multiple times, it's almost always going to be a 7 or higher. So 8 is not, in my head, 8 is not that high. 7.5, I feel like, is kind of, it's okay, and I'm happy I watched it, and I'm fine to watch it, a couple times every now and then. But it's verging on, like, I may not ever want to watch it again, which I guess is where Isle of Dogs is for you.
Yes. How many times have you seen it?
Isle of Dogs?
Yeah.
Well, I saw it in theaters, and then I saw it at least once with the kids when it came out on DVD, and I watched it yesterday. So that's at least 3 times, but I think there's probably 1 or 2 extra viewings in there. So probably around 4, maybe 5 times.
Did you watch it again?
I don't know. I mean, not, I see, now this is the difference between you and me. You do watch movies a lot over and over. I tend to have so many movies and shows that I would want to watch that, like, just seeing it once is like usually enough for me, because there's other stuff that I still want to see. So I don't really rewatch hardly any movies. So, actually, I might have seen Isle of Dogs about as many times as any Wes Anderson movie at this point, because I just don't watch movies a ton of times.
I was surprised that you'd seen it 3 times.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I kind of am too. But
would you buy it on VHS?
Would I buy it on VHS? Yeah, it's man, I really do kind of miss watching on movies on VCR. But I noticed, I don't know if it's our TV or what, but we watched, like, 10 years ago, we watched Back to the Future 2 on VHS. And I remember, like, standing up. I don't have great eyesight, I should wear glasses, but I usually don't. But sometimes I see, like, something really clearly, and I'm like, ugh. And I remember standing up not too far from that TV screen, like, this looks awful. Like, either our TV has terrible resolution or VHS sucks. And I'd never noticed that before.
There's several stories of you squinting your way into perfect vision.
Yeah, I do that.
Is there anything else to say?
No, I think that's it. That was, I think it was kind of a fun viewing, and we're way out of chronological order just for this week, and the next week we'll continue with Royal Tenenbaums. I think from that point on, we work almost purely chronologically, except for the shorts, because we wanted to group some of the short films together. So those aren't purely chronological, but otherwise we're chronological for all the feature films.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you start the thing.
Oh yeah. I'm Seth Andrew Hecox,
I'm Brandon Michael Williams.
and together we are
Intentionally
intentionally
Wes.
Wes Anderson. We got to work on
All
our
right.
timing.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to do on Zoom. You got the theme song next week.
Yeah, I got to remember the thing. I got to put it on my notes so I don't forget. My eyesight is bad and my memory's bad. I'm getting old.
Okay.
Uh,
See you,
all right.
man.
See you, Brandon. Enjoy
Bye.
vacation.